So recently, I started reading a book entitled How to Be an Anti-Racist. The author is Ibram X. Kendi. He's a professor of history and international relations who lives in Washington, D.C. And he's the author of another book called Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America, which won the National Book Award for Nonfiction in 2016. And that's also one I would like to read because he's really an amazing writer, very engaging. And if I had seen this book last year or even a couple of months ago, I probably wouldn't have been interested in reading it because I thought, oh, I don't need a book like that. I'm not a racist, and I'm strongly opposed to any kind of racist ideas or behaviors. But then in the past month or so, with all the events that have been happening, the death of George Floyd, who comes on the list of a long, long list of Black people who were killed by police and vigilantes, and then all the protests that erupted in the wake of that, and all the discussion about racism in our country and in many countries around the world. I read an article just the other day about Holland, where I've spent time, and yeah, they're also looking carefully at racism in their country. So these have led me to realize that I do need to learn more about this topic. But probably the strongest incentive for my interest in this book came from back in May. We had a course with Professor Jay Garfield. We were looking at Yogacara philosophy. And at the time when we were talking about the Alaya Vijnana, or sometimes it's nicknamed storehouse consciousness, which is a particular view of the Yogacara school, and how this consciousness is like the repository of seeds or imprints of all the experiences we've ever had, all the thoughts, all the perceptions, all the actions, all the speech. So there's this huge collection of all these seeds in this storehouse consciousness, and our present experiences occur as a result of that, those seeds ripening. And he compared it to the idea of unconscious in Western psychology, because we're not conscious, we're not consciously aware of what's there in our storehouse consciousness, but it does influence our thoughts, our experiences, and so on. And as an example of this, he used implicit bias. He talked about implicit bias, which for me was a new term. You have to remember, I've been away from this country for a long time, so I have a lot of catching up to do. And he urged us to take an implicit bias test. And he said, you'll probably be very surprised by the results. So I was really curious. I've never done that kind of test before. So I went to the website and did this test. And when I did it, I felt pretty confident that it would confirm what I already believed, that I'm not a racist. I don't have racist ideas or attitudes. But I did notice while I was doing the test with some of the questions, I was really careful about the answers I was giving, because I really wanted to make sure I got the right results, like how would you feel if a Black family moved into your neighborhood? How would you feel if one of your relatives was dating a Black person? Oh, that's completely fine with me. I wouldn't have any problem with that. But then when the test ended and they gave me my result, it told me, I can't remember the exact language, but it was something like I strongly favored white or European people. Not just mildly, but strongly. And I was like, really, I could feel it all through my body. I was just shocked. And so I felt so ashamed, almost like I'd gotten an F on a test, That's not what I wanted to get. So I just I couldn't think. My mind was just like, how is this possible? How could I get such a result? Because I was thinking, but, I've been a Buddhist so many years, most of my adult life, and Mahayana Buddhist on top of that, 46 years of learning about bodhicitta, love and compassion and equanimity for all sentient beings, meditating on them, even teaching them to other people. So I thought my mind should be totally affected by that, and I should have zero, uh, you know, attitudes of discrimination or preferences. And then on top of that, of course, emptiness, where you analyze a person and you look through all the parts of the person down to the tiny particles and you can't find anything you can point to as being the person. So, we're all equally empty of existing inherently independently. So why discriminate between one person and another? So, that's probably why I thought I should have this equanimous mind and I should get a different result from that test. So then I started thinking about my life. And I grew up in a white family, people with very light skin and blue eyes and blonde hair. And also in my neighborhood, I couldn't think of anybody in the neighborhood that wasn't white. Even brown-skinned people, we all had Anglo-Saxon or German names and all looked pretty much the same. And at school as well, I went to Catholic schools. There may have been a few people with brown skin, Latin names like Lopez, but no black people, no black kids. And in fact, the only black people that I saw in the early part of my life were the garbage men. That's what we called them. Maybe they have a different term now, but we called them the garbage men. They would come very early in the morning, sometimes still dark outside, and empty our garbage cans into this truck that drove down the street. And I remember sometimes peeking through the curtain, looking at them, and their very dark skin, and they wore these dark blue coveralls. And they looked really scary. Almost like they were creatures from another planet. So, of course, there was no communication with them. I would have been too scared anyway. And I also remember an incident that happened when I was 5 years old. We grew up in Sacramento, and my grandparents lived in Los Angeles. We would go and visit them usually in the summer and stay with them for a week or so. So when I was about 5 years old, we were at my grandparents' house, and one morning the doorbell rang. My grandmother went to answer it, and I tagged along behind. She opened the door, and it was the mailman, and he was black. And I yelled out the N-word and ran away. Thankfully, my grandmother didn't let me get away with that. She went and got me and made me come back and apologize to this man. I really, really am grateful, because I don't think I ever used that word again after that. I probably didn't even understand what it meant. I don't even know where I got it from. I'm trying to remember, where would I have heard that word? My father, did he use it? It could have been my older brother. I learned all my nasty words from him. The kids in the neighborhood. So he would pick it up, and maybe TV, I don't know. Anyway, somehow I learned that word, but I probably didn't really understand all the implications of it. But I do remember this man's face. He was kind of small and probably in his 50s or 60s, because he had gray hair, gray beard. But he had a very kind face. And he didn't look angry when I apologized. And, he looked at me very kindly and probably accepted my apology. But I feel so bad thinking back about that. Yeah, when you're a little kid, you don't really understand what you're saying and what things mean. But later, of course, when I studied history in school and learned about slavery, the slavery in our country, I was just horrified that human beings could do such things to other human beings. And I was just totally opposed to that whole idea. But anyway, thinking about my life experiences and how I just didn't have contact with black people. And in fact, I think it was only when I went to Nepal in the 70s, and I was living at Kopan Monastery, and shortly after I got ordained, there was this young man, Yogi, remember Yogi? From Connecticut, black, very sweet, very, very, very nice young man. And And we did the Vajrasattva retreat together. So summer of '74. That was the first annual Vajrasattva retreat at Kopan Monastery. So we were among, I don't know, 10 or 12 people who did that. And I really liked him a lot. But he's really the first black person I ever really got to know in my life. But then he went, well, I should say, fortunately, he got ordained and went off to Sarah Monastery and spent the next couple of decades studying there. But anyway, I just didn't have much actual experience with black people. So thinking about this, I thought, well, it's kind of understandable that I would have strong favoring for Eurasian or European Caucasian people, just not having had much experience. So anyway, I don't want to be a racist. So I thought, I don't think that the results of that test mean you are a racist. I think it's more that you have been influenced. I think it's so easy to be influenced, and then that becomes part of your unconscious. The way you think, the way you feel, the way you see people and think about people and so on. So I thought it could be helpful for me to read this book. I'm only about a quarter of the way through and probably haven't fully absorbed even the parts that I have already read, but it does give me a lot to think about. For example, the idea that, racism won't go away just by not talking about it, by pretending it's not there anymore because we had a black president already and, we're past the civil rights movement. So racism doesn't exist anymore. This is what some people think. They think it's just not there anymore. So that's not the case. And also, just thinking that we're not racist or claiming that we are not racist doesn't necessarily mean that's true. For example, a person who made comments about black people being lazy and stupid and that most Latin immigrants are criminals and rapists, and then that very same person denying that they are racist and even saying, I am the least racist person you have ever met. Well, that's kind of an extreme case, but it just shows, it's not enough just to think I'm not a racist or say I'm not a racist, but you may be influenced by racism. And he also points out different kinds of racism. For example, cultural racism, in which we regard our own culture as superior and any other cultures that are different from ours as inferior. And I can see that in myself, even in the context of Buddhism, Buddhist culture. Yeah, we are the best. So anyway, I think it's been an eye-opener for me to look at my own mind and my own attitudes. And he says in the book, the only way to undo racism is to consistently identify it and describe it, and then dismantle it. So let's hope we can develop our awareness of these kind of issues and problems and do what we can to free ourselves from them so that we can help others to do the same.